Well, this brings us to The Phantom Snorefest. By my Catholic God, this is one of the most dry and mundane films in the science fiction genre.
By dry and mundane, you mean poignant and beautiful, Joe?
You mean poignant, Donnie?
Fuck you, that's what I said.
Whatever. Look, The Phantom Menace is infamous for good reason. There's some aspects to the film I rather enjoy, but it would be ignorant to ignore the film's many, many flaws.
This movie is so boring with its long-winded political talk. All the scenes with Sheev Palpatine, Queen Amidala, and the Trade Federation really put me to sleep.
Most unsurprising anecdote I've heard.
Got him.
Star Wars is all about the action. If I wanted to hear political talk, I'd reclaim my seat in the Senate.
You're literally the president right now.
This movie has great politics. The conflict with the Trade Federation was a perfect allegory for the US and China trade war. Senator Palpatine was a great character. The way he handled the war with such charisma and appeal to those around him. I'd vote for him to become president of the United States within a heartbeat.
Donnie, remember Qui-Gon's funeral and when they panned the camera to Palpatine as Yoda and Mace Windu were speculating who the current Sith Lord might be?
Yeah, what about it?
Never mind.
The characters involved with the political discussions were great too. Queen Amidala was fair and balanced as a leader.
As far as I'm concerned, you had your amygdala removed when we made the Metroid tier list. It's pronounced Amidala.
Damn, Barry, and they say I'm the one in cognitive decline?
Anyway, the midi-chlorians ruined the Force. They took all of the mystique away from it.
Midi-chlorians were planned from the start. Let's look back on Return of the Jedi, Barry, the film you claim to love oh so much.
Okay, and
Right before Yoda dies, he says there's another Skywalker, obviously meaning that Leia is his sister. Keep in mind, at that point of the film, we're led to believe that Luke is the only hope for the Jedi. Why would him having a sister be relevant information pertaining to that?
where are you going with this, Cheeto Brain?
I'm saying that something genetic aiding your ability to use the Force was set in stone as far back as Return of the Jedi. They literally talk about Leia potentially being trained in the ways of the Jedi in that movie.
What are you even saying, man? My brain can't keep up with any of this.
Figures. Anywho, can we also talk about the diversity in this one? Like with Jar Jar Binks, Watto, and the Nemoidians. This is diversity in Star Wars done right, unlike those woke Disney movies.
What? Jar Jar? I never want to hear you rag on me about the Ewoks ever again, Donnie.
To backtrack a bit, I really don't see the appeal in how Episode 1 presents its political content at all. Even beyond the plot, the characters are utterly terrible.
Excuse me?
No, let him cook.
Young Anakin was infuriating to listen to. He literally thought Padme was an angel from heaven. What a moron.
I can at least agree there. Young Anakin is what holds Phantom Menace back from being an S.
Okay, but he was portrayed by a literal child at the time. I wouldn't use such harsh words, especially considering what Jake Lloyd dealt with in the years that followed.
Fine, but Jar Jar Binks was still a disaster. He's nothing more than an unfunny racist caricature of Jamaicans, intentional or no. Only Donnie would find humor in that.
You're not wrong. Back to Anakin, though. I like the idea of Anakin's backstory, but felt that Anakin himself wasn't handled the best.
How so, Alabama?
He had nothing to do with the main conflict at hand, which made the part of the climax where he blew up the Trade Federation control ship come off incredibly half-assed and contrived. To give A New Hope credit, the Empire actually affected Luke in some way, making the trench run feel more climactic.
Facts.
In contrast, I really like Qui-Gon as a character and how he contrasts with Obi-Wan in this film. He takes issue with the Jedi Order, and this plays heavily into the whole thesis of this trilogy. He's a very wise Jedi, but his wisdom isn't as by the books or conservative as the rest of the Jedi Order, especially Obi-Wan, which makes him more interesting.
Now you're cooking, Barry. Qui-Gon saw the potential in Anakin, the best character in this saga.
I can understand that, but Obi-Wan barely gets any screen time in this movie. He doesn't get enough time to really conflict with Qui-Gon. In fact, he's literally on the ship doing nothing while everyone else is on Tatooine.
That's a fair point, Joe. They could have had Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan split up during the Tatooine section. Or hell, had him go with Qui-Gon to further flesh out their dynamic and relationship.
And speaking of boring characters, Darth Maul is literally the blandest villain in the saga. Duller than the modern Amtrak rails.
Darth Maul is a badass, and you know it.
He never speaks and has no clear motivation compared to Vader or even Kylo Ren.
Or Count Dooku.
He doesn't need any of that. What he has over all of them is intrigue, fear, and cool factor. Like, for God's sake, Joe, he has a fucking dual-ended saber.
That's cool and all, but it only does so much.
Hard cap. The expanded development he got in spin-offs is outstanding. really building up that rivalry between him and Obi-Wan.
Donnie, it should go without saying that we're primarily judging him based on his role in this movie.
Agreed. Even if his development later on was fantastic, it doesn't change the fact he was a fancy-looking piece of cardboard here.
Oh, for fuck's sake. He is literally the reason Anakin becomes the way he did by slaying the only Jedi who would have prevented him from going to the dark side. And at this point in the lore, the Sith have been thought to be extinct for millions and billions and zillions of years. So for Qui-Gon to find one out in the wild like he did strikes fear into the Jedi Council. That has to mean a good bit.
I guess, but we should move on now, as we've been spending too much time on Maul.
Can we at least talk about their bigly epic fight at the end, though? No cap. It is the best sword fight in all of cinema. Everyone is saying this.
You say everyone is saying this all the time. It's lost all meaning, my orange friend.
Shut up, I'm right this time.
I guess not everything in this film is bad. The final lightsaber duel with Maul was certainly a well-choreographed and performed set piece, I'll admit. I could watch that fight scene by itself and still enjoy it, removed from the shoddy film surrounding it. And that reminds me, John Williams absolutely delivered some of his best compositions for Episode 1.
I can't believe I'm saying this, but that's such a W take.
I concur. The whole soundtrack is nothing short of amazing. The original trilogy had great music too, but John Williams went above and beyond here.
Especially the music just before the pod race scene. By the way, did I mention that the pod race was amazing?
It's a fine enough scene, I'll admit.
Oh, hey, that sequence is my sleep time aid. And just like everything in this film, it's a CGI mess. God, this film is so ugly looking.
No, ugly looking is how one describes Rosie O'Donnell. The special effects are revolutionary, Joe.
Lord of the fucking Rings was being made at the same fucking time and came out with better and more revolutionary effects. Felt like watching Toy Story half the damn time.
I'll admit this film uses more practicals than the other prequels, like for explosions. But I have to concede that when CG is used, it looks horrible.
Oh, come on. Don't fucking tell me the locations and environments don't look absolutely stunning like Naboo and Coruscant.
It's pronounced Coruscant. But I guess that's fair. The CGI for creating environments and locations still holds up rather well and proved that something like this was possible. But you have to admit it was shaky to downright laughable in other instances, like the battle at Naboo.
You mean the battle on the Windows 95 background?
That's actually really good, Joe. I'll give you a Girl Scout cookie after we're done with the list.
Oh boy, I can't wait.
Peasants. You're all peasants before the dawn, that's all I can say. That and the Phantom Menace is worthy of an A tier. As I mentioned before, Anakin really brings the film down a notch, but just about everything in this political romp is fantastic. Super underrated film.
Folks, this is a D-tier film, not without a couple qualities saving it from being utter trash, but just about everything else this film does is a complete failure. I remember back in 1989 when I saw this in the theater, I was so disappointed. I wrote to George saying I want the $4 I spent on my ticket back.
Wow, Joseph. While I don't feel as strongly about this film's poor quality, and there's some genuinely great aspects of it, I'd still say it's the weakest film we've covered so far. I'll put this in C tier.
Come on, Barry, nothing lower than B tier.
Too bad, Donnie. C tier to even us out.
All right, boys, time for the best film in the entire saga, Attack of the Clones, a film so incredible it makes my dong go bing bong, bing bong.
Of all the things I've ever heard you say, this might be the least coherent thing yet. And this includes all the times you pinged me on Discord when I won the election.
Donnie, the ability to speak does not make you intelligent. One more time, and I'll remove your talking privileges for at least 2 minutes. Anyway, while I do think this film is a bit overhated, I don't think I'd go as far as to say it's one of the best in the saga.
The rumors of you being in cognitive decline must be true, if you're really out here capping for this film, Donnie.
I've taken many of those tests recently and have passed with flying colors.
I'm sure, big man. Anyways, Attack of the Clones is probably the worst dialogue and acting of the whole saga, especially with Anakin and Padme.
He's not entirely wrong, Donnie.
Fake news. It's perfectly fine and suits Anakin as an awkward young man. Hayden Christensen did a wonderful job portraying this with his complex performance.
Oh, come on, Donnie. You have to admit the cringe factor was off the charts here. Half the shit he said and did with Padme would have gotten him a restraining order with how uncomfortable he was making her. She said so herself in the scene when they were in Padme's room. We never really understand why Padme would like him in spite of that.
Joe, you're describing Han and Leia in Empire.
You're way off, Barry. Anakin and Padme are nothing like Han and Leia in 5.
You're right. Episode 2 handled it better.
Fuck no. Not even remotely true.
I wouldn't go that far, Hussein, but I like that energy. Anakin may have rizzed her up, but not in the same way Han rizzed Leia up.
At least Anakin would start to back off anytime Padme was uncomfortable. Han never really did that with Leia.
Donnie, only a socially inept dipshit would say Anakin had good riz.
And you're the expert on good riz. Show me the number of porn stars you've hooked up with, sleepyhead.
At least I wouldn't make them watch Shark Week for hours.
Children, please, can we get back to talking about Attack of the Clones?
Come on, guys. You gotta admit, Natalie Portman was very beautiful in this film.
I'll at least concede to that. Her midriff is the only good thing in this entire Forsaken film.
Siskel and Ebert, ladies and gentlemen. As for some positives in the film, the world building is great here. We're introduced to a whole host of different planets like Camino or Geonosis, and even for returning planets like Coruscant. We see more of it than we have in any other Star Wars film to date.
Now you're cooking, Barry. Attack of the Clones has the best world building in the entire saga.
Oh, for God's sake, Geonosis is just Tatooine with a palette change.
Ah, yes, Joe. It's the exact same. The Geonosians aren't completely different creatures from the ones that inhabit Tatooine.
The assassin plot added a nice sense of urgency to the proceedings, proving that powerful figures are lurking in the shadows of the Republic. And I mean, the set pieces taking place during Anakin and Obi-Wan's journey are quite memorable, such as the airspeeder chase, 50s diner, and the entire third act after the protagonists get captured. If only Hayden Christensen's performance and the film's dialogue could match this energy.
Cooking some fine steak right now. Don't forget that epic asteroid belt chase. That sonic boom sound is peak.
Oh, absolutely.
Those set pieces are all right, but when the characters suck this bad, it really makes you question the integrity of the film. For example, Obi-Wan is a complete dick to Anakin for no reason, always criticizing him for every little mistake. I thought they were supposed to be good friends, like Obi-Wan described in A New Hope.
Wrong.
Count Dooku had such wasted potential, we barely get to even see him. What a fucking insult to an incredible actor.
Bullshit. Count Dooku was an amazing villain. He's the perfect counter to Qui-Gon. Both of them feel the same way about the Jedi Council, but took different paths. He helps build off of what Qui-Gon stood for.
Yes. And even if his screen time was scarce, Christopher Lee gave such an incredibly nuanced performance depicting a man who just wants what's best for the galaxy, even if it means turning his back on people he cared about. Throughout this film, he constantly offers the protagonist mercy.
I didn't get a single iota of this bullshit from the character. Such copium.
Whatever. If we're going to keep talking about characters, can we discuss Anakin some more? He's the main character, after all.
You mean the biggest example of character assassination in the whole saga?
Who pissed in your Cheerios, Joe?
Anakin in Attack of the Clones is the most relatable character in all Star Wars, especially in the scene where he and Padme are sitting on the grass in Naboo. He brings up a good point. Politicians need to just sit down, agree what's in the best interest of all people, and do it.
So you admit you get all of your politics from Anakin in this movie?
That explains a lot.
Anyway, I can see the merit to Anakin's character, but I think having him commit genocide on the, quote, sand people might have been a bit overkill.
Bullshit! It brilliantly shows his dark side and what he's capable of. This moment plants the seeds of Darth Vader brilliantly. Those degenerate sand people deserved it anyways. I would have done that too, to be honest, especially if some illegal killed my beloved Ivanka.
Oh my fucking God.
Explains the total presidential immunity appeal.
Moving on from that, let's talk about the fight scenes.
Oh gee, the fight between Yoda and Dooku was so lame. Even beyond CGI puppet Yoda, the whole thing just feels so fake. And the whole sequence rips off Empire, what with Anakin getting his hand cut off. God, even the lightsaber duels in this movie are lame. That was basically the only thing Phantom Menace had going for it.
Wrong. Yoda flipping around and absorbing the Force lightning was so badass. Also, you have to admit, it's pretty impressive that Christopher Lee was basically sword fighting against no one, yet it still looked as convincing as it did. Rest in peace, King.
I'll give Donnie that. I also thought Obi-Wan's fight with Jango Fett was pretty engaging and unique.
If you like watching two grown men slip around on a rainy floor like a Hanna-Barbera cartoon, then sure.
What a downer you are, Joseph.
And can we talk about the clones and how they were poorly introduced? They just appear with little build-up, and the audience is just supposed to accept them on the face of their existence. Sure, we understand later their purpose, but they hardly played a role here, only to just appear in the final act out of nowhere and with little explanation.
I'm guessing you fell asleep during the Camino scenes.
Yeah, Joe, I really don't know what you're even on. I've never seen you with such a hate boner before.
Well, there was zero mission.
Don't remind me. But admittedly, this one feels bigger.
Disturbing innuendos aside, I think we have exhausted everything with this film. As I stated, this is the best in the saga, so no lower than an S.
Pretty obvious where Joe would put this. I'm putting this in B tier Not only because it balances our viewpoints, but it's also where I'd personally place it.
Am I hearing clown music right now? This is clearly an F-tier film. What? Are you guys going to put the room in B-tier next?
I would.
Fine, Joe. Least I can do is C. Happy?
Don't make me test Donnie's presidential immunity claims.
Fuck you, Obama. I was actually going to let you place episode 2 in B tier and not cry about it. Oh well.
Up next, we have Revenge of the Sith. And let me tell you, this movie is absolutely goated. This is the first and only prequel to equal Return of the Jedi, S-tier film.
I think that might be a bit too high, but this is probably the only prequel that I liked. Unlike the other two movies, interesting shit actually happens in this one. Sure, it has its flaws, like Anakin's turn to the dark side being rushed and coming out of nowhere, but it's still actually enjoyable this time around. Imagine that.
Hard cap about Anakin, Joe. Episodes 1 and 2 did a good job setting up a predictable scenario where it's easy to see how he turned to the dark side. For instance, it's clear that Anakin began his Jedi training too late, not to mention harsher moments like the death of his mother. Were you not paying any attention to those events?
That's all well and good, but Anakin's fall is only really talked about briefly to the point where it's easily missed or barely touched on. Sure, seeds were planted, but there was so little time to let them grow and develop. One of the biggest aspects of Anakin's turn was his relationship and bond with Palpatine, to which Palpatine used Anakin's love for Padme against him.
What are you even talking about, Joe?
We didn't see their relationship grow in the slightest. And here in episode 3, they now have a relationship out of the blue that developed off screen. We didn't see this in action until the Clone Wars show.
They established that Anakin trusts Palpatine through his awareness of the Tatooine incident and Anakin's actions. Something only Padme knew beforehand and that Obi-Wan probably doesn't even know happened. Again, Joe, were you paying attention?
I guess I wasn't, but these movies are so sleepy. Can you blame me?
So you admit that you deliberately ignore details about movies you don't like, eh, Joe?
Yes.
Joe, I have to say I'm rather disappointed in my former VP. Donnie, being as big of a prequel fan as you've been, would you say this is the best one in the franchise?
Well,
Donnie?
Oh, don't tell me you prefer the Phantom Snorefest and Attack of the CGI.
this movie is so incredibly bogged down by the amount of lightsaber duels and action set pieces. It's repulsive. There has to be some bombastic event every 20 seconds. Like, what the fuck happened to pacing? Like, yeah, George, we get it. Lightsabers are cool. We don't need them in every other goddamn scene. Episodes 1 and 2 took their time and gave necessary exposition between all the action.
But Donnie, the constant engagement Revenge of the Sith offers is a good thing. That's what Star Wars is at its best.
Yeah, if you're 5 and know nothing about what makes movies good, oh, look at the shiny keys. Aren't they interesting? What really grinds my gears is that none of these duels even compared to the one in Phantom Menace with Darth Maul. Anakin versus Obi-Wan on Mustafar is so over the top that it loses all sense of stakes. Not touching the Darth Maul fight, not even close.
For fuck's sake, Donnie, you're missing the point of that fight. Not only is it one of the best sword fights in all of cinema, but it is the climax of this whole trilogy, and an emotional one regarding the relationship between the two. The emotional weight of this fight cannot be overstated. It earned its length and over-the-top nature.
And while I had no problem with Yoda having a lightsaber in Attack of the Clones, I have to ask, why the fuck does Palpatine have one? That's blatant character assassination. In fact, everything about Palpatine in this movie is wrong. They villainize him constantly, despite his great efforts to end the Clone Wars and bring peace and much-needed order to the galaxy. Anakin was also villainized for no fucking reason.
Am I in the fucking circus?
Donnie, this has to be the most media-illiterate statement I've ever heard from anybody. How the fuck do you put your goddamn pants on?
Also, can we talk about Mace Windu? I fucking despise him, particularly in this movie. Like, for fuck's sake, he was about to kill Palpatine on the spot without even giving him a fair trial, and the movie portrays it as wrong when Anakin stops him. To be honest, it's like looking into a mirror. A well-loved politician is being unfairly treated to the point of weaponizing their Justice Department, and the brave patriots trying to stop it are villainized. Utter disgrace. Not to mention, Samuel L. Jackson clearly can't deliver the bespoke dialogue of George Lucas.
Jesus fucking Christ, I need some alcohol right now.
And so anyways, I do enjoy the action-heavy focus of this film, but most of all, you have to give a lot of credit to the cast for bringing the most of this dramatic and somewhat tragic end to the era, especially Ian McDiarmid, who is absolutely having a ball in this film.
His manipulative actions and speeches were impeccable, especially with Anakin in the Opera House. I still quote the story about Darth Plagueis to Michelle at least once a week.
Lame. Couldn't care less, frankly.
I'm aware.
Now listen here, Jack, this film is a massive improvement over Attack of the Shit dialogue. For example, the romance between Anakin and Padme is not front and center, and cringy moments between the two are few and far between. Hell, Anakin even kills Padme in this one. I'd say that's an improvement.
Padme's death was handled so poorly. Apparently she dies of a broken heart. What pussy ass wrote this script? I refuse to believe professional writers put that in there.
Can we also talk about how great Obi-Wan is?
Shut up, Barry. God, we're not even at the sequel trilogy yet, and we're already seeing stupid plot points in this franchise.
Can I actually get a chance to explain why this is an S tier without Donnie hounding at me?
Good one, Barry.
And Cheeto Dick is muted.
Damn, Barry, all right, go ahead and speak your mind.
As I stated before, this film perfectly shows us the tragic fate of Anakin Skywalker and the birth of Darth Vader. Episodes 1 and 2 may have had their issues, but they still did a good job setting the stage for everything in this movie. Like Anakin's impulsivity, Palpatine's manipulation, and the mass killing of the Jedi Order, Revenge of the Sith is the most climactic and emotional entry in the Star Wars saga.
Well, I don't find the film to be nearly as polished as you often claim. Especially with my earlier arguments on that still standing, I can definitely see a lot of the positives here.
The immolation scene, as well as Vader's transformation shown alongside Padme's death, is all peak cinema.
I agree with you, Barry. The immolation scene still gives me night terrors to this day. But this film still has more things holding it back for me, such as the dialogue or how General Grievous was handled.
I can concede to some of those things, Joe. Some lines were way too on the nose, and Grievous is only like half the badass he was in the 2D Clone Wars cartoon. Hang on, though, I've got like 50 pings, and they're all from Donnie.
Yeah, Mel has sent me some wondering why he's throwing a tantrum at his computer. You think we should unmute him? He's been muted for long enough.
He's only been for like a minute, but sure, I guess.
I just have one thing to say. Suck on this, L.
From my point of view, you're taking the L.
Also, fuck you, Joe. You're conceding to all of Barry's awful takes and hyperbolic praise for this pile of bantha manure.
Oh my fucking God, Donnie, I didn't concede to every point he made. Like he was really mean to me when I said Anakin's turn to the dark side was rushed.
That's not true, and even then, you admitted you weren't paying any attention to this trilogy. So sorry, not sorry.
Revenge of the Shit is guilty for glossing over the entire Clone Wars, just to show us Order 66, and Lucas uses minimum effort to tie this all together. This is why the political exposition of episodes 1 and 2 were important, you nincompoops.
If you're suggesting that episode 3 should have just been concerned with the Clone Wars, I suppose that's fair. However, General Grievous's presence helps connect to that larger event, even if he was underwhelming here.
Grievous is as threatening as Rocket Man. He had 4 lightsabers and lost all of them to Obi-Wan, and fucking exploded to a few blaster shots. All he does here with those lightsabers is showboat. And the CGI in that fight is awful too. In fact, this whole movie is just CGI. It's way more prevalent and overused here than in 1 and 2. Felt like I was watching a cutscene in a PS1 game the entire time.
Oh, come on, Donnie. Yes, there may be an over-reliance on CGI in episode 3, but it's clear so much effort and passion went into making it look as gorgeous and detailed as it does. Every frame of the opening battle over Coruscant was brimming with lasers, explosions, and ships. There's just so much going on, and need I mention the detail in the Order 66 scenes? This film just makes the whole Star Wars universe feel alive.
There's so much of what this film does couldn't have been done to the same effect with practical effects, really showcasing the pros of CGI over practical effects. Moving on, can we at least admit the score is the best of the saga?
Hell yeah, Anakin's betrayal makes me cry every time I hear it.
Based! This is by far Williams' best score to date, and one of the greatest film scores in history.
I can't disagree with either of you, but John Williams always delivers. So it's somewhat of a given. But nothing will ever compete with Duel of the Fates. It's so incredible he reused sections of the piece in the climax of this film.
Won't deny how much Duel of the Fates slaps, but the strongest pieces in this score outdo it solely on the fact that Williams captures the heavy emotional drama and weight of this film so effectively. Duel of the Fates is epic for sure, but it doesn't have the emotional backing that Revenge's score does. Battle of the Heroes is one of the greatest themes for this very reason, not only in the saga, but in all of film and media.
Folks, we've been at this for 10 fucking minutes. Where does Remember the Sith rank on this godforsaken list?
D tier, The only thing saving this trash compactor-worthy film from F is how it continues the great world building that episodes 1 and 2 set up, which is more than what I can say about the next 3 films. But other than that, bantha fodder.
Donnie, I'm not putting this in D tier.
Shove it, Alibaba.
I give it a B tier. Sure, it doesn't remotely compare to the original trilogy, but it's still a solid film in its own right.
Can I put it in A tier to split the difference?
I think I'll live.
Yes, lightsabers make brain go brrr. I declare this list rigged.
You lost, Donnie. A tier it is.
You're too dangerous to be left alive.